You are very welcome along to the Off the Ball Sunday pay-per-view. It's Richie McCormick here with you on this Sunday afternoon. We'll start you off with the headlines today, and for once we're going to the front page of the Sun to start us off. Daniel's Fright Club, gangster ruled over boxers with fear, say the Sun on their back page. Under Hope and Glory, they've gone with Ander Herrera's winner in the FA Cup semi-final, United's Cup of Glee. Johnny to do talking in the final, Sexton plays safe, they say on the back page of the Sun there. On the Sunday Times, again, it's Leinster's win yesterday over the Scarlets that dominates. Too hot to handle. Leinster's thrash Scarlets to reach fourth European Cup final. And also at the bottom there from Peter O'Reilly, IRFU won Carberry or Byrne at Ulster. The story that Leinster are looking to possibly, or even the IRFU are looking to possibly see Joey Carberry or Ross Byrne offloaded to Ulster to try and get them some game time and potential international experience from that point on. On the Sunday Independent Sports section, Merciless Blues book Bilbao date. Sexton salutes Henshaw as Leinster scalp Scarlets. Also Klopp and the Cop, Liverpool in search of Champions League final place. There's lots and lots of Liverpool Champions League semi-final previews, playing Roma of course in midweek. More credit, United do a job on Spurs to take place in FA Cup final, and Jose takes pop at his critics. That's on the back page of the Sunday Mirror. And also a final countdown for Triumphant Blues Champions Cup stroll for classy Leinster, and 10 million hitch over Conte. Neil Moxley reporting that Antonio Conte's departure from Chelsea may be hitting something of a snag. Le Gaffer is what the Sunday people go with. Guardiola, Vieira now ready to be top Prem boss. Pep Guardiola is back. Patrick Vieira to become a top Premier League boss. Pep Guardiola, who's in charge of Manchester City, and Patrick Vieira in charge of New York City. Those two clubs inextricably linked. Possibly worth mentioning on that one. Ander winner is what they go with on the back of the Sunday World today. Herrera is the hero as Jose blasts critics. And on the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday, Awesome Blues, Leinster booked their place in Champions Cup final. Now it's over to Munster. Munster of course taking on Racing in Bordeaux today, and there's also an exclusive one-on-one interview with Phillip Lanigan talking to the new Ords Jurhor of the GEA, Tom Ryan. We couldn't sustain a pro game, insists Ryan. And on the back of the Daily Star Sport on Sunday, and they've gone with the Celtic story, rather unusually for them. Gunnar need crazy offer, Bren, only extraordinary deal may tempt me. Brendan Rodgers, one of those candidates to succeed Arsene Wenger, it would seem, if the papers are to be believed, at Arsenal, though he would appear to be down the pecking order somewhat. Phil Quinn from the Mail on Sunday joins us, and also Kieran Cunningham, sports writer with the Irish Daily Star, joins us as well. Afternoon, gents.
Just thinking there, Richie, actually,
go on.
Three of us all live in the north side.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Do we?
Yeah.
This is more Northside Dublin representation than the Irish football team gets at the minute.
Well, there you go.
Good
The
point.
Irish football team has hardly anybody from Dublin on it at the moment.
Exactly.
Let alone Northsiders.
I know how things have changed. Yeah. We'll get to your piece with one of those Northsiders momentarily, Philip, because Ronnie Whelan features largely in the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday. But I suppose we can only go one place today, given the nature of his appointment in 1996, given what he's gone on to do in the game in those 22 years since, and given the fact that we weirdly enough happen to be at the Emirates today for Arsenal and West Ham on Off the Ball. Arsene Wenger's departure from Arsenal dominates a lot of the pieces today. I suppose we'll start with Ollie Holtz.
I thought that was the best piece, to be honest.
It is, because there's a piece with Jonathan Northcroft we'll get to in a moment, and there's a piece also with on him from Graham Souness in the Times today, which is, I don't know.
Souness less than complimentary, which we'll come back to, I think, in a moment. But Ollie Holt has done a first-class piece.
But it's an interesting one, Richie, because this there were murmurs in social media around 9 a.m. on Friday Wenger was going. I think the official announcement came around 9:45. So by lunchtime, the amount of stuff online, the amount of pieces already up, like with the likes of Jonathan Liu and The Independent, there was podcasts up. No, there was oceans of stuff within 2 or 3 hours.
Even ourselves.
Oh yeah, you guys came back in to do an extra Off the Ball AM or something, didn't they?
Yeah, Adrian Dave and Phil Egan were in here.
Yeah, so it was such a challenge then. What do you write for the Saturday? And then particularly for Sundays, what do you say about Wenger on the Sunday that hasn't been said already? So it's one of those stories that it shows how the media has changed. Like a few years ago, there wouldn't have been anything like the amount of reaction until the next day. But now straight away, even with Sky Sports News, like you're going to Klopp's press conference, what Klopp is talking about, Guardiola's talking about in his press conference. So everything is instant.
He was the lead item. Wenger's departure. I was listening to. I'm sorry to say, I was listening to another radio station on Friday. I was listening to BBC Radio 6 Music and the news, half early news. not the latest goings on between North Korea and Donald Trump, not Theresa May's inferences with the Windrush generation.
Or
Avicii's passing as well, but rather it was that came later in the day. But it was Wenger's departure, which was, I thought, incredible for a BBC radio news piece to be dealing with the departure of a Premier League manager. It was quite something.
But one of the things I was thinking, Richie, he's actually, I think you can make an argument he's the most significant figure in the history of the Premier League. Like Alex Ferguson clearly won far more than him and far more successful, but Ferguson is very much a part of the culture of British football. Like, and from that background, the west of Scotland, working class background, from the docks and from the mines, etc. Yeah, but Wenger came in and he's just... He, like there's somebody, Jonathan Northcote makes a point. He lists off the likely successors, and virtually all of them are from the continent, whatever. And he says that's the big change, Wenger. Like when he came in, I was just checking it the other day. Ruud Gullit was the only other manager from outside England, Scotland, or Ireland. And
does Gullit come in? I'm trying to think of the chronology. Is Gullit appointed after Wenger?
Yeah, but it was that same season.
But that's what I was looking at. There's the idea of a foreign manager.
Yeah, but there were ones before, like Joseph Venglos at Aston Villa, but they were all treated as joke figures.
That's the thing. When you think of what Joe Venglos achieved in Czechoslovakia, as was at the time, was fantastic, and he on the continent was a highly thought of manager. He comes to Aston Villa, and Wenger got a lot of this when he arrived in '96 as well. Who is this guy? The famous headline is Arsene Who, but the general prevailing theory was, who is this guy? What does he know about the English game? How can he come over and tell us how? When you consider that Arsenal have had George Graham and Bruce Rioch up until that point as well, for them to go Wenger was quite the departure, but it also led the Premier League to quite like everybody wanted a foreign manager after that. But even still, I was going through. I wanted to see. What I wanted to do was see how many foreign managers there had been in the Premier League. I ended up on one of those Sporcle quizzes where you're asked to fill in the names alongside them, and it's like you've got like 25 out of 55. I think up until the start of the season, it was only 55 foreign managers. Like half of them have been at Portsmouth, and you do well to name half of them, the Alan Perrons of this world. His sustainability has been utterly incredible. But what he's like, Ollie Holt's piece makes a point of saying and highlighting the changes that he brought to the game in England, because it was a completely different game that he took over in '96.
But it's funny, there's one change, and he hasn't mentioned it, Ollie, but he was the first manager ever to field 10 outfield black players, which was this was 10 years after black players were being pelted with bananas at English grounds. Like that was hugely significant in its own right. But he goes into a lot of it there. How he intellectualized it, he helped to make it cool again, he helped to make it more attractive to a wider audience, and rid of it much of its insularity, and that was a big one. English football was very insular. Like it was the suspicion of ideas from abroad was very widespread, and it still lingers, because you see this with Guardiola. The amount of people wanted Guardiola to fail because they thought, who's he coming in with his fancy notions and telling us how to play the game?
Well, Johnny Foreigner, you see that goes right back into the sort of British psyche. Britannia ruled the waves. The sun never sets in the British Empire. We did everything right. We don't learn from anybody else. They learn from us. But people did learn from Wenger, and it was interesting that Pat Rice was on the radio the other night, and everyone was giving their view. But he was the guy who met him in the hotel to bring him to the Arsenal training ground, having just been appointed. And he didn't admit it. He knew nothing about him, because he wasn't a high-profile footballer. He'd done a bit of work at Monaco as a coach, but he wasn't an international. And he called at the hotel, and I'm here, Pat Rice here for Arsenal, to bring it to the stadium, or bring it to the training ground. Yeah, come up to my room, said Wenger. Okay, says Rice, go up to the room, and the room was. Basically, the room was creaking and groaning with VHS. Remember them? VHS cassettes of all of Arsenal's games that season, all labelled and dated, and all of Arsenal's opponents, all labelled and dated. And Rice went into the room and he said, within seconds I realised that this man knew more about Arsenal Football Club than I did about the players. So that his attention to detail was extraordinary. He was determined to, quote, land running, which he did. Did he stay too long, though? That's the question. And we might touch upon that later on in another debate. I think his body of work, to use that expression, stands up very well. And you're right, he did light the flame for non-English nationals coming to English club management. And the successors here, Enrique, Lowe, Allegri, Vieira, Ancelotti, the candidates, you don't have, the Brian Clough type figures that would have been around when he came in.
We'll get to the did he stay too long argument, because I know it's one that Graham Soon has peddled today in the Times, and
which he says he did,
probably rightly so. To a degree.
Well, it's good to have a contrasting view.
Absolutely, it is, and a lot of the coverage since his announcement is along the negative, because given Arsenal's record over the past number of seasons, the FA Cup's aside, and obviously this year's run to the Europa League semi-finals, it's not been great. Their succession of top 4 finishes is admirable, and I think history will prove in time that that was an achievement in and of itself. But when we talk about how the foreign manager is still viewed upon with suspicion, like with Ollie's piece and with Northcroft's piece, names that come up time and time again as potential successors are Eddie Howe, Sean Dyche, because of the admirable jobs that they've done in the Premier League to date. And people wondering why wouldn't Eddie Howe be given this job? Why wouldn't Sean Dyche be given this job? The basic fact of the matter is, as I can see it, and this is an outside person looking in, there are better candidates available. And that happens to be how Wenger landed that job in the first place. And I think that they were tired of Bruce Bjork had done okay as far as I remember. But
he had signed Dennis Bergkamp.
He doesn't get credit for it. But there are other candidates out there that were clearly better in Arsenal at the time under the stewardship of David Dean and others decided, and Peter Hill-Wood decided that we need to take a bit of a left turn here. We need to try something different. Wenger happened to work brilliantly. And it seems as if they want to go the same route again. One of the things that maybe scuppering their search for a successor, they want the new manager to be able to bring through youth at the club, which I don't know, if I was an outside manager or an agent looking in, would also translate as the budget ain't that much. You're going to have to do what you have to a degree. But again, there is that view of suspicious glasses that we view the foreign manager still, despite the work that Wenger has done in the league. Yeah.
And the other issue is, in one way, it's a very attractive job, because it's a London club and a lot of foreign players want to live in London. They have a magnificent stadium that's been paid for. They have the highest ticket prices in the Premier League, so there's a steady revenue stream. And they've not a bad squad. I know that Arsenal have been really good, but there's a basis of a strong squad there.
It needs a lot of work.
Yeah, it does need work. But the problem is, at the same time, City are going to improve, Liverpool are going to improve. You would expect Chelsea will kick on again. So it's going to be very competitive, even if they get into top manager. For them to get back to where they were, winning Premier Leagues and contesting, being in the Champions League year after year, not going to be easy. Not going to be easy by any means.
There's a major overhaul required at Arsenal.
Yeah.
Major overhaul, and has to be root and branch. And I think it's going to be several years before they see them challenging again. The team they have at the moment, the players they have at the moment, they're not good enough. I don't think they're good enough in their minds or good enough in their bodies.
On that.
And I think they're going to go backwards next season. And I think that the guy coming in, actually, it might not be the best job in the world. It could be the guy who follows the guy who comes in.
That's what Mick said back in the day after
like Louis van Gaal.
Jack Charlton. You don't want to be the man after the man. You want to be the man after the man after the man.
Tell that to Louis van Gaal. Tell that to Louis van Gaal. Northcroft's piece kind of outlines where Arsenal are at the moment. And you might see a little bit of why Wenger has decided to step aside. He outlines the people who are involved above, or I suppose lateral to Wenger in terms of the running of the club, also involved in replacing, apart from even Gazidis, of course, in replacing Wenger will be Arsenal's head of recruitment, Sven Mislintat, a former player whose input with Klopp at Borussia Dortmund was beyond that of an ordinary chief scout. Then there is Rahul Sanelli, Arsenal's head of international relations, the last of 9 new department heads brought in by Gazidis as he prepared for life after Wenger in the past year. If you're Arsene Wenger and you see the likes of a Borussia Dortmund's man in Mislintat, or Saleni, who's worked in the past with Luis Enrique in Barcelona, you can kind of see the way the wind is blowing, and you're thinking that maybe all of the control that you once had of this club is being eroded somewhat, and maybe it is time to move on, and he has taken the sensible option here.
I think he would have gone at the end of the season, but he wanted to go, I think, of his own choosing. I think he was disappointed when he had the meeting on Tuesday with Gazidis, where it was made clear that they actually want him to step down. And he went, he had an option another year to go. And
because Northcroft mentioned that and said that the issue was that there were empty seats appearing at the ground, and that's ultimately what made them make the call.
There wasn't the Europa League. I think in Wenger's world he would have had a crack at finishing the Europa League, holding up the trophy, because they can win that competition. There's not great teams left in it, and that would have been the ideal way of going out on a
There's
high.
incredible
But
contrast
he was forced out early.
Yeah, when you mentioned the 9 heads of departments that were brought in by Gazidis,
what are those departments?
Yeah, but that looks like, oh god, there's incredible micromanagement going on, and they're in charge of everything, and they're looking, every tiny little detail has been scrutinised. But then Northcroft finishes up with an incredible story about when they went to Östersund in the Europa League. And there was the pitch they were supposed to play on was frozen. They sent a solitary staffer to look at the surface. It was a frozen pitch. It could be very difficult to play on. The players sit back at their hotel, having snowball fights in the car park, and complaining their trainers were wet.
Nice.
And you think, like, if you talk about attention to detail, like why wasn't Wenger there looking at the pitch and think, right, we've an issue here? Things that seem to take their eye off the ball a little bit.
It doesn't take a genius to go, if you're going to play in outer Sweden in the middle of February, that the pitch mightn't be in the best of nick.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem like the biggest leap. But we've got these potential replacements being listed by Jonathan Northcroft today, which is why his piece reads a little cold, I guess, especially compared to Ollie Holt's attempt at balance, I guess, in the legacy of Arsene Wenger, and those will only be taken with time, I guess, too. The likes of Luis Enrique have been named in here, the likes of Julian Nagelsmann, who's at Hoffenheim, of course, and was a potential replacement for Jupp Heynckes at Dortmund, but they've opted for Niko Kovac, given his record in the Bundesliga in and of itself. Vieira is mentioned.
It's interesting Benitez isn't mentioned. Rafa Benitez.
This is a drum you've banged before, Benitez would be ideal.
But he has a track record, and he gives you a steel and a defensive solidity that Arsenal really have been lacking. So they seem to want a similar type to Wenger, which is why you go for Brendan Rodgers.
They want exactly
but
the type.
A Rodgers team would be as fragile as a Wenger team.
The Rodgers thing is fascinating, because at Celtic he has dominated in a very small league, but in the Champions League, where Celtic have been asked to see what are you really like, they've failed miserably.
And did Liverpool went in there? They were annihilated.
So I think it's a huge jump up. I think Enrique's the guy they want, and he's also available.
I think it was Oliver Kay the other day on Twitter pointed out, because Rodgers' name came up a lot. It was one of those British managers that were named along with Dyche and along with Eddie Howe as potential replacements. They might be further down the list, but they are potentials. And he pointed out that some may say that Brendan Rodgers failed to win the league with Liverpool in 2014 with this squad, and others might say Brendan Rodgers nearly won the league with Liverpool with this squad. And he had a picture up of the team photo from that year, and the amount of cloggers that are in it was utterly incredible.
When you're saying cloggers, you're still at the front three. You're still at the front three. Sturridge, Suarez and Sterling. Sterling at the moment, who are going really well. You're still at Steven Gerrard. Of course, Gerrard is
he fell over on the ball against Chelsea.
You had Martin Skirtle scoring 12 goals from centre half or something bizarre.
But it was a freakish season. If you've got Martin Skirtle scoring 12 goals, it's not your average season.
No,
from his first side.
But take out the two front, obviously Liverpool over front three, brilliant front three at the moment. But outside of that, is the current Liverpool team any better than that one?
That's an argument possibly for another day.
Even particularly midfield.
Yeah.
I have to say, Dyche and Howe, fine jobs that they're doing at smaller clubs. They haven't even managed a Europa League qualifier. I can't see Arsenal going anywhere near that.
Big Sean will from next season.
If they get, they're on course. They're on course. Yeah. But let's see how he does in a couple of years' time. But the big names are the guys who've done it at international and club level, whether it's World Cup winner in Jogi Low. Allegri did a good job at Juventus and a good job. He was the Italian manager as well.
But you look at the David Moyes thing. David Moyes is similar, I think, to Sean Dyche and something. He'd done brilliantly at Everton, but it was just too big for him. The scale, the Arsenal job is a massive job. I think you need somebody.
And again, you're being tasked with being the man after the man.
Of course, and that's why I think you do consider somebody like a Benitez, because they have dealt with the pressure of massive clubs. Like he's been at Real Madrid, Liverpool, Inter Milan, Chelsea. So I think you're taking a gamble. You're basically taking a punt on somebody who hasn't been in that kind of job.
There are Arsenal fans listening to this now or watching this who are, when you mention Benitez's name in connection with Arsenal, they're rolling their eyes and saying, "No way!"
I know quite a few of them. I know quite a few of them say he'd be great for Arsenal.
Alan Shearer yesterday on BBC Match of the Day, the Cup semi-final, he made a point. He said, "I hope they keep away from Benitez." Look at the job he's done at Newcastle.
He's done a phenomenal job at
money,
Newcastle,
and you talk about defensive organisation. Look at the goals against Colin for Newcastle United. It actually has kept them. It's got them a point. It's worth a point in the Premier League. They've kicked on. He has done very well with very ordinary resources, and he took over at Chelsea as a caretaker and did an excellent job there. So I don't think Arsenal fans should be too picky or choosy.
And even at Real Madrid, when he was sacked, they topped their group comfortably with 16 points. I think there were 2 points off the top of La Liga. I was let go pretty harshly. Zidane came in, and Zidane took all the credit then when his team won the Champions League.
Listen, I'm not the person who's poo-pooing your idea of Benitez at Arsenal. I'm merely saying that the same people who flew planes over the Emirates.
No, but I think it's more United fans that hate. I think the Arsenal fans would be quite.
It must be very wealthy to do
that. I'd like to see the Facebook comments or whatever at the moment as they tick up and say no way. There's absolutely no way. It's just a sense I get that Arsenal fans wouldn't be that welcoming. They kind of want. It would seem, given the fact that Wenger's been there 22 years, they want an image of young dynamism, I guess, to come into the club. They want someone like a Luis Enrique to come in. He'd be the ideal candidate. But then beneath that, Massimo Allegri from Juve. He'd be a bit of an unknown quantity. Ancelotti be a bit more pragmatic in terms of his approach.
Yeah, Sarri at Napoli, I think, should be in the running. I think he's done a great job.
The job he's done in the past 2 seasons has been remarkable there. But
the likes of Joachim Low, I don't know what
plays nice football, but hasn't managed the club for 14 years. So
you don't know.
He hasn't had to because the German team being so successful.
Yeah, you don't know if it's a very different challenge. You don't know. And Enrique as well. Like Enrique came in. How good is Enrique? I don't know. Are
you of the?
Well, look at the players he has.
That's what I mean.
But this is almost the argument you have about Celtic. It's like, sure, anybody can manage Celtic. Does anybody come in and manage Barcelona? And not
but it goes back to like when Guardiola left Barcelona, Alex Ferguson said in an interview, it'll be very hard for him to win the Champions League without Xavi, Iniesta, and Messi. And that has turned out to be the case.
Yeah.
No, they haven't. I don't think he's even got to pass. He hasn't got past the semi-final without the three of them.
Four of the last 5 years in the quarterfinals.
So, like Enrique had those players. We don't know what Enrique will be like with Jack Wilshere and some of those dudes.
I tell you, I'm sorry. I said it earlier. There's a massive clear out neither at Arsenal. The players he have there.
Wilshere be head of that line.
Very ordinary players. When Wenger took over there, he also took over a team of winners. Let's not forget that. He had guys that had played under George Graham, who had proven themselves in the English game and had an English mentality, British mentality, and he worked on that. He used that initially.
But the other thing with Phillip,
he gradually integrated his continental ideas. But the British Bulldog spirit was vital.
Yeah, but Phillip, a top manager can really improve players. Like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, I think, has improved dramatically since Klopp got to work with him. So there could be guys at Arsenal that the right man could get another 10-20% out of.
I wouldn't disagree with you there. That man you mentioned when he went to Liverpool, I thought, I thought he was a
job
for an Arsenal reserve. Yeah. And I saw him against City, the Champions League, and I said, he's the same player.
Yeah.
Interesting. Graham Souness.
I was just going to touch on that.
Unkind cut here, Richie. Very unkind cut.
Literally from the first ball. Arsene Wenger has tarnished his legacy at Arsenal by staying too long. If he left after his first decade in charge, a period that covered the 3 league titles, he won 4 FA Cups and the Champions League final loss to Barcelona in 2006, he'd be remembered as one of the truly great managers. He really doesn't need to go anywhere from here to Souness, but he has a couple of 100 words then after that.
Yeah, I thought the most it's a very sour, it's a pretty sour piece, but the passage that jumped out at me was, I must have managed against him about 20 times. My spells at Southampton, Blackburn and Newcastle overlapped with his at Arsenal. I'd ask him in for a drink after games, but he never came, so I don't know him. On the touchline, he wanted to influence referees as much as he could, like all managers do, whether verbally or with gestures. So
I love the way...
It comes down to not going for a glass of Prosecco.
I absolutely love that. Going for a glass of red with Graham Souness is ultimately the litmus test for any Premier League manager, and whether or not they're a good sort or not.
Souness is hanging himself there, but he says my spells at Southampton, Blackburn and Newcastle.
Yeah, you've been through all of those and then disappeared out of the management game while Arsene Wenger is still there and will probably pick up a decent job in the summer. Let's not forget Arsene Wenger. I don't think at PSG, because Thomas Tuchel is somewhere down the line towards being appointed.
But he does make a very valid point. He did stay on too long.
When would have been a good point to go?
Huh?
When would have been a good point for Wenger to go?
In hindsight, Souness's point is had he gone again, when is a good point to go? He says 2006.
At least 5 years ago.
He said 2006, probably a little bit too soon.
Yeah.
But if you go in 2006, you've just nearly beaten Barcelona in the Champions League final. You've been unlucky to see Sol Campbell sent off. You probably could have won that game against a decent side that had Ronaldinho, Xavi and Iniesta. I mean,
and you have Arsenal fans saying, "Come on back, we need you, Arsenal, miss you so much." But are they saying that now, 12 years later? I don't think they are. But it touches upon the other point: when is a good time to go in sport? Not just football, anywhere in sport. Who has gone out at the top? Who said, "This is my final season, this is my final game, this is my final horse race, this is my final golf tournament," and went out at the top? And we were talking about it earlier.
Yeah.
And the list of guys who went out at the top, and guys and women, and who got it right, is much smaller than those who stayed on too long.
How do you ever know?
Well, there's
like, how do you, like, and it's not necessarily how do you know when it's time to go. How do you know when you're at the top? Like, if you're, like, I know Brian O'Driscoll is going to be one of the names that you cite. Like, Brian had several good years, let's be quite honest.
Yeah.
He could have gone at any one of those.
Yeah.
But he kind of knew that when he was possibly just hitting the apex, that's the time to walk.
It is very hard to walk away, especially if you're a footballer, for example. Golfers, for example, are different. Darren Clark was meandering towards the seniors tour, but really hasn't been a golfer since he won the Open in 2011. But he's still playing, but he's not playing the level he played at. But in footballers, for example, or soccer players, we mentioned Roy Keane, and Kieran says to me earlier, what was Roy Keane's last match as a footballer? I'm going, was it Clydebank or Clyde? It was against somebody in the Scottish League.
His first one was against Clyde.
His first one against Clyde.
Yeah.
So the greatest Irish soccer player in the last 30 years compares to me with Brady and Giles and McGrath are all-time greats. he ended in an ignominy in the Scottish backwater. Now, had he ended at Man United lifting the FA Cup or the League Championship, people would have said, what a way to go. But players don't want to go. And Keane himself kept playing because he had this little thing about the Celtic grow. I want to play for Celtic, that emotional thing a lot of players have, which I think, in retrospect, he probably admitted was a mistake to go there. He had a damaged hip, he had a damaged shoulder, he had a damaged foot. He couldn't move around.
Like you even see this with John O'Shea. Now, John is saying he wants to play another season, and if he stays at Sunderland, that's going to be in League One. And this is I think he's the 4th most decorated Irish player of all time. But to go out on a high, like we were going through the list, it's Muhammad Ali. The last sound he heard as a pro was a cowbell against Trevor Berbick in the Bahamas. That they didn't even have a proper bell to ring the end around, so they went out, literally cut it off. From around the neck of a cow. Sonia O'Sullivan was at it in Athens 2004. Her last Olympic final, she was lapped in the 5,000 metres final. Paul O'Connell, his hamstring been ripped off the bone in his final game.
Liam Brady getting the hook by Jack Charlton.
Yeah, and even in management, if we go into other management, like Sean Boylan, his last few years they fizzled out. Mick O'Dwyer was the same. Brian Clough, relegation with Nottingham Forest, drink problems taken over. Bill Shankly, knowing very quickly he'd made a mistake, going to the board to ask to be taken back on. And turning up at training, so Bob Paisley eventually had to bar him from the training ground.
He's going to watch Tranmere train instead. He died of a broken heart a few years later.
So you see this, like,
I don't, you want to blame Tranmere for that.
Like we go back to,
I like Tranmere.
But Phillip mentioned in the stacks of VHS tapes that Wenger had, that showed the obsessive nature he had. He was completely obsessed with this job. To the point where it just took over his whole life. So I think he probably found it unthinkable to think of life when he wasn't managing Arsenal.
It is that Flann O'Brien thing in the third policeman. We're basically is the third policeman, is it? Where basically becomes
the atomic theory of bicycles.
Exactly, pretty much. You're on the bicycle so much that the bicycle rubs off and you rub off on the bicycle.
Yeah, eventually you turn up as like 40%. You're 40% bicycle.
Where does the bicycle
end? The molecules of the bike are going into you.
But that's Wenger and Arsenal.
There's something new every day.
That's Wenger and Arsenal now. They're so intrinsically linked. Like to rip himself away from that leaves a massive hole in his part.
Do you think he would have gone to himself at the end of the season?
This season,
Wenger, he would have chosen himself. This is my last match, my last press conference, Premier League, May 13, or the Europa League final, whatever it is. This is my last game. I'm announcing to the media, I'm going.
I think so.
Do you think he would have liked that? I think Wenger.
That's a possibility.
I think he probably deserved that.
Yeah, he deserved that. But there's a possibility he might have done that. But at the same time, imagine if they'd won. They had won. He hadn't made an announcement. They'd won the Europa League. He knew he had a Champions League ticket. It's very hard. I would say it'd be very hard for him to just say, "God, I have another crack at the Champions League. Maybe give it another year."
And then what happens? We mentioned. We mentioned a guy here at the top. We mentioned Shefflin. He got out at the top, having come back from an injury. Tony McCoy announced live on television after winning a race at Sandown, I think it was Sandown, that he was going to finish at the end of the season. And it was about 8 weeks ago before the end of the season. Every race meeting he went to from now to the end of the season. It was his last time at Kempton, his last time at Wetherby, his last time at Liverpool, his last time at Chepstow. And then it was Cheltenham. And it was just, at the end of it, it was almost like, and there was a fly-on-the-wall documentary of his final day at Sandown. And he said he was absolutely dreading this. He says, almost like, why did I put myself under this pressure? Why did I announce I was going? But he knew he had to go. And he went out at the age of, I think he was 41, 42, as a champion. Yeah. He went out at the top.
We're now in
this
parade begins today for Wenger, because obviously they've got West Ham at home. West Ham at home. Gazidis talking in his press conference says what he hopes for now is a coming together of the Arsenal family sufficient to douse the pain. West Ham will be a great atmosphere, he said. Thursday versus Atletico Madrid will be electric, and then the Burnley game on May 6th will be a send-off the world will take notice of. Which almost highlights the hypocrisy of the Arsenal fans in the past 2 years, because they haven't been showing up, and that not showing up has led to his departure.
Now they're going
to show up en masse and be like the last day at Highbury when they're all decked in red and white and everything's a wonderfully choreographed send-off. It's just very odd, and I think in the last couple of years he probably deserved better, but that's the prism of modern football that we look at. We want instant success and constant success, and if it doesn't come,
I don't think you're going to see 22 years again, Richie, either. I think
you won't see 10 again. You won't see 10, Phillip.
You won't see 10. But look, like, the thing, but they say that he has boosted the average of the Premier League managerial life just by his nature, the fact he's been there 22 years. Like, if you look at it, if averages are to be believed, we're in the final overs of Guardiola's reign at Man City, at Klopp's reign at Liverpool, and possibly a couple other, and Mourinho's obviously at Manchester United too. So
I think the average at the moment is it 1.5 years, the average tenure in the Premier League?
1.8, I think is, something along those lines, and it was pushed up slightly. And
like Eddie Howe is the longest serving, but only 3 of those years have been the Premier League. I think he's out 6 years, is he?
Yeah, all told through League One, Championship, and then thing. I want to get to this piece in the Sun, because given the nature of Carl Frampton fighting last night and winning against Nino Donaire, there is a piece which seems remarkably timed on the front page of the Irish Sun on Sunday, Kieran, which is Daniel Fright Club, gangster ruled over boxers with fear, and it talks about Daniel Cunniham's links with what was MGM, now MTK Promotions, and feeds into this ban for Republic of Ireland journalists who were again locked out, it seems, last night of the Odyssey up in Belfast for this fight. It's a remarkably silly situation.
It's a really messy story, and it's a very depressing story, I think. And it's, I think it's one of the biggest in Irish sport at the moment. That, from what they're saying, Daniel Cunningham, there was a buyout, and he's no longer involved with MTK. Okay, that's their line. But at the same time, MTK is a massive power in boxing, and it was built on Daniel Cunningham money. And there's very valid reasons to question where this money has come from. And so I think it's right that this has been reported on. But this boycott is one of the stupidest things I've ever come across in journalism. And it makes no sense, because you do a quick Google search and you find that the Irish News and Belfast Telegraph have written the exact same stories as papers south of the border about the links of MTK, whether now or in the past. So why? But this ban is a partitionist one. It only applies to Republic of Ireland media, and I think it's the bottom line there is money, because they need to sell tickets in Belfast. But
there would have been tickets to be sold in Dublin.
Yeah, of course.
Like at fights, like if you have a car that has Paddy Burns and Carl Frampton and another, and Mick Conlon in the 3 Arena as it is now, like it's going to do well. Yeah, but now we're in a situation where it can't.
There's a very important issue here as well, Richie. The statement made by the current head of MTK, Sandra Vaughan, she said, they're not going to have any events in Republic of Ireland because this, we're staying out of Republic of Ireland. They're not allowed to fight in Republic of Ireland. The Gardaí, since the shooting at the Regency, and all that's going on, events are being. They won't let the events with MTK fighters go ahead. That shows the biggest story it is. This is an extended interview with an insider, it says, and there's a lot of astonishing detail, basically claims that fighters were offered drugs for payment. That many of them were too scared to leave the stable, that Cunningham ruled the camp with fear. But I do feel sorry, because I know a fair few of the boxers within MTK, and have a huge amount of time for them, and I think they're in a bind, because where do they go? They're in a very difficult business, a very dangerous business. In the last 3 months alone, I think 2 fighters have died in the ring. And basically, nobody does professional boxing. People only do professional boxing for one reason: for money, to make a living for themselves and their families, because it's such a hard and difficult business. And I'd love if there was an alternative for them to go to, within a management company with the clout of MTK, that they could go somewhere else. I think a lot of these guys feel they've no alternative. They have to go with MTK because there's nothing else around. And also MTK look after them, from what a lot of them say, look after them quite well. They get more money than they would another management company. The training facilities are very good, etc. But the links aren't going away. Even if, as mentioned here, some of the boxers are still referring to Daniel Cunningham as their manager. So how do we know? The official word is that the links have been cut, but there's contradictions there. But even if the links have been cut completely, it was built on Cunningham money. We can't get away from that.
It's a remarkable situation that I just don't see a positive end for, and I'm just kind of scratching my head. I can't see the logic in the ban, especially in the Republic of Ireland journalists. It just, on any level, it just doesn't seem to make sense, because you've got journalists in this country who report on boxing. There are no boxing correspondents per se anymore, as you pointed out outside. But you've got journalists the likes of Kevin Burns, Sean McGoldrick of this world, who do an awful lot of boxing, but only cover boxing. It's not as if their reports were laden with mentions of X, Y, and Z. It was just a case of, they're trying to report on the sport.
They play it down the middle.
And they've always been...
and are excellent at it.
For 95% of the stuff that the Irish boxing journalists write about Irish boxers is really positive. At least 95%.
And it has always been. Irish boxing has always been a positive
They're always
story.
trying to raise a profile about guys like Luke Keeler from last night, who beat Conrad Cummins. And the wider public might know him, but these guys have been writing about them for years, trying to get people to get interested in them.
If you go looking if you see a fighter pop up on an undercard on Sunday suddenly they perform well, you do a Google search and you find the same 3-4 names have been writing about them constantly and saying that this guy's coming.
And also a lot of them, a fair few of them are freelance and travel around the world to these fights on their own expense. And they're not making huge money out of it. It's been there's a passion at play there, and they've been very badly treated.
You mentioned promoters there. The only boxing story I have, I didn't do much boxing in my Indo days, but after the Olympics, I think it was in '96. Was that Macaulay in '96? Or 92 in Barcelona, was that Macaulay? David Boyd Macaulay. Maybe 92. He was maybe 92.
Yeah.
And he was fighting his first pro fighting was up in Belfast, and I was sent up by the Indo, and I went up with Sean Coffey of the Irish Times and Martin Brady. And Jimmy Meakin actually came from the press, the late Jimmy. And we went, where did we go before the fight? To Barney Eastwood's house. Barney was promoting it, and they were talking about promoters and journalists. Barney invited to his house, which is a very splendid affair on the road towards Hollywood, and couldn't have been more nicer. Gentlemen, great to see you guys up promoting the fight. I'm just thinking like.
Did you say thank you very much, Mr. Eastwood?
I said it several times actually. I certainly did.
Maybe for the older viewers there.
I didn't. Thank you very much. I didn't do much boxing, probably for a reason. But there's an example of relations were very very tight, and I remember as well in the Indo back in the day where Steve Collins would ring in looking for the boxing correspondent, looking for the late Tom Cryan, and I remember picking the phone up and saying he's not here, and Steve Collins saying to me, is he in the sub office? And that was the sort of the code name for the pub. I said, yeah, he is. Bachelor, I'll get him there. Next thing I knew, but an hour later, Tom Cryan, the Square, came back in. I said, did Steve Collins get you? Oh yeah, he got me a good last day. This is a world champion ringing a journalist in a pub to give him a line. So things were a little bit tighter then. But maybe things will change a little bit. Not necessarily for the better.
Yeah, there are whispers the boycott might be ended soon.
Right.
And it'd be interesting because Michael Conlon is going to have his first fight as a pro in Ireland in I think it's near the end of June. And I would think Michael would there might be pressure coming on then to relax it before that comes in.
That Eastwood story was Wayne McCullough who was.
There we go.
Wayne McCullough.
92. Phil Quinn conveniently has pages 82 and 83 open on the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday. And lo and behold, what's the byline on the top? One Philip Quinn. Well, it's a lovely piece of Ronnie Whelan, it has to be said. Ronnie, who gets looked over all too often as being... I think the fact is, Ronnie Whelan is one of the greatest Irish footballers that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
He's not always necessarily viewed as such, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, it's a curious one.
He is. I would say maybe you have to be a certain generation. Maybe younger people wouldn't. I would have thought he'd be regarded. But
we're talking about the Giles and Brady's get mentioned as the greatest footballers of all time, and that generation is long since.
Well, we were in Turkey when I spoke to Ronnie. It was the day of the Ireland Turkey friendly, and the night before I was out with two colleagues, Tony Dunnett, Marty, and Paul Lennon, and we're all about the same vintage, and we were picking our best Irish team from sort of 1985, Jack Charlton's appointment.
You've done that in every dinner
we loved
for
it.
at least 30 years.
We loved it, And it's funny, Ronnie was in, even though we agreed that probably he didn't have his best games. He probably had a better club career than he had an international career. But Euro '88, he was huge. People don't realise what a great player he was.
Even if you look at the span, like you mentioned it here, like you talk about the captaincies. We'll get to the captaincies and those two major tragedies momentarily. But he spanned 79 to 94. When Laurie Lode made the trophies, you say his time span, the last ties to Shankly and the first to the Spice Boys. Ray Clements was in goal for his first Liverpool game, and David James, God love him, for his last. 15 years at a top flight club. We talked about Wenger being 22, being a manager. I mean, this isn't necessarily going to happen all that often anymore either.
Yeah. I think Ronnie's career probably compares favourably to that of Roy Keane at Manchester United.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of his influence, and also in terms of the way his game was moulded. Keane was signed as a sort of midfielder who broke forward and scored lots of goals. And look at his record for Man United earlier. Then he morphed into sort of the shielding midfielder, the Kante role of today. And Ronnie was an outside left almost when he went from Home Farm to Liverpool. And then when Fagan left and Dalglish took over, people thought Ronnie could be gone here because they signed Barnes and they signed Beardsley and they signed Ray Houghton, and suddenly how was Ronnie Whelan going to fit into this?
Slot him in the middle.
And he slotted him as a holding midfielder beside Steve McMahon, and Ronnie said it was the making of me in many ways. Injuries did cost him a couple of big matches and a couple of cup finals as well, which one of which he was most annoyed about. 88 against Wimbledon.
It still seems to nibble at him.
It nibbled, yeah. And he told, he was very good about it because that season 87-88, he reckoned it was the best Liverpool team he played in.
Yeah.
And they were denied him playing in Europe because of events of Heysel, where Ronnie was captain, which people overlook. He was also captain at Hillsborough. Yeah. So two hugely emotive moments there. But 87-88 season, they were the great entertainers, and they were probably what Man City have been this season. They they didn't mind conceding the odd goal, but they scored 3 or 4. And he said Barnes was electric on the wing, and Beardsley up front with Aldridge. And Aldridge was a goal scoring machine. And they won the league by a comfortable margin. Actually, they beat a very good Man United team, I think by about 8 or 9 points. And it was a good Man United team. And then they go to the cup final, and they're playing our old friends Wimbledon. And it's going to be a double. It's a 4-0 nailed on, and Wimbledon isn't picked. And I said to him, I looked at the stats and I said, a week later you played for Ireland an international match on the way to Euro 88. Why didn't you play this cup final? And he goes, can you let me out? Because I'd missed a couple of games, come back, played again, had a sub. And he said, no, I'm going to leave you out. He didn't even make me sub. He said...
only 2 subs.
And he said, and that hurt, he said. And the annoying thing was that they lost 1-0, and 2 days later they were playing the Ellen Hansen testimonial, the Monday night. And Dalglish shoves him the armband and says, you lead the team out. And he said, 2 days later, I wasn't even in the squad. So that hurt a little bit. And I think, and he said, you know what, of all the matches he played, and he just made a little point, he played lots of big games, but they played Wimbledon a few months later in the Charity Shield, and he said, and we won. It was just a little observation.
That's very Mourinho-esque to be leading on a Charity Shield.
There's a great
victory.
story in that, because I was a steward at that game.
Really?
I was a steward at Wembley.
No way.
Why,
hold on a minute now. How do you fall into being a steward at Wembley in '88?
I was a student at the time, and I went to London, as a lot of people do, or did back then, to work for somewhere. And one of the things, I went to an employment agency, and they gave you a different job. Like one day you might be moving furniture, you might be I was washing dishes at Royal Ascot and Wimbledon for the tennis, but also one of the jobs was a steward at Wembley. We've got a whole section,
we've got a whole piece with you.
This is a chapter for the book.
So one of the jobs was I did a few things. There was a big Amnesty International concert at Wembley that year, and Pink Floyd, I think, where I did that, and Michael Jackson. And then I did a tournament with Arsenal, Sampdoria, and a few people.
The Makita.
But the Charity Shield was one. And I'll always remember, because it was long before I had any interest in the media, but I was stationed below the radio box, or the TV commentary box, and Brian Moore, the great Brian Moore, was going up the steps, and he said, how are you? I said, how are you, Brian? Gentlemen. But it's funny, the first time I ever came to Dublin on a trip was I was 14. It was a home farm friendly against Liverpool, and it was part of the Ronnie Whelan transfer deal. They played them in 81. Liverpool won 5-0, and it was Grobbelaar's first game. And I remember him doing handstands on the goal mat, doing all the nonsense he used to come out with. But it's interesting what he says about that Charity Shield game. He went in and he kicked the crap out of Wimbledon, himself and Steve McMahon. And he said Laurie Sanchez could have been sent off for kicking him back. And he said maybe a bit of that was missing in the cup final. He was out to make his point.
He says a bit of that was certainly missing as Liverpool's fortunes started to crumble and all that. I'm interested, did he talk much about, because I know he talked about his managerial stint in Greece with Panionios, and then on to Cyprus as well. Olympiacos and Apollon Limassol and stuff like that. Like Olympiacos Nicosia, he was managing there. Why didn't the management thing take hold with Ronnie?
He said did well at Southend. They were actually the top half in the championship, and they lost the 2 centre halves around January, and they went from being 4th or 5th down the table. He got Panionios to the quarter final of the Cup Winners' Cup against Lazio, and Alexis Salas and Mikhailov, and he said they had a 70 million team. He said we did well to get nil. And then he went to Olympiacos, and he said they were in 2nd or 3rd place with a couple of games to go, and he was sacked. But they qualified for Europe, and he was due a bonus, and he was told to drop it. But he went through the English FA and he got his money. But his last gig was at Apollonia, Limassol, and he said it was very scary there. People were following him home after games. At least, I think they were following me home after games. He said maybe that was a bit of paranoia, said I to him. But it was all a bit edgy and a bit scary. And he kind of felt maybe it's time to get out of here. And you know what he said? One of the reasons he didn't keep going to management, he loved playing. And he was still able to play, he was able to join in at the time. And
still only 56.
56, yeah. And he still loves to play, he still gets out. I think he's a very, 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 not only a very nice fella, a very underrated sort of player. I do think, though, that his Ireland career could have been greater.
His relationship with Jack wasn't a great one. It was fresh at the time. I even recall that in around 1990 when he was in the squad, obviously for the World Cup, and his fitness wasn't what he wanted it to be. But there was a sense that his fitness wasn't exactly what Jack wanted it to be, not necessarily what he wanted it to be. Similar, I guess, to the 88 final. And that he feels he could have played himself, and Jack was like, I'm okay with Andy.
I think the 3 players he didn't trust were Ronnie, Liam Brady and David O'Leary.
3 of the most naturally gifted footballers.
All Dubliners, and also that goes back
to anti-Dublin bias, and it goes back to the 80s.
Go back to the Paul Rowan story, the team that Jack built. I came in, I was going to put my foot down, I was going to break up these cosy cartels, and he humiliated Frank Stapleton when we brought him to Italy in 1990 and never gave him a second. He didn't bring Liam Brady to the Italian 90s, still the greatest own goal by any international
He
manager.
says he regrets the Stapleton thing. I remember reading about Charlton. He had 5 strikers.
He treated Frank terribly. And Bernie Slavin and David Kelly, who were ahead of Frank.
And John Byrne.
John Byrne, who were all, but the way they won the World Cup was interesting, because I was doing this column at the time for the Evening Herald, and I was doing pick me, Ronnie, I'm fit, pick me. This is our story every day. And we were getting the Herald brought out, and I was going to the team hotel and dropping them where I knew Jack would be, a bit like Hansel and Gretel, little breadcrumbs around the hotel. Jack's bound to see one of these Heralds. And eventually he picked her up and he's going,
what is
pick me, I'm fit. What does he bloody well know? And he shut it down. And maybe I did Ronnie more harm. But Ronnie tells a story that Jack put him on against the Dutch.
Did you tell him this when you were doing the interview, by the way?
Possibly. But he recalled I was doing the column all right. But against Holland, it was 1-1, and it was. At that stage, we hadn't heard what was going on in the England game. The Anschluss hadn't been decided. They sort of, we
down tools.
And he sent on Ronnie. And apparently, Ronnie says that one of the lads in the dugout said after a couple of minutes, "Look, this is Jack." When Ronnie goes on, I told you he wasn't fit. You can't do it for me. And Ronnie didn't play then against Romania at all. When it was crying out for someone, with the heat of that day, shakers. It was crying out for somebody on the ball. And then against Italy in the quarter-final, we need a goal. It's 1-0. We're 1-0 down. 20 minutes to go. Jack turns around and says, "Shez, on you go." John Sheridan, the first touch, put the ball to the corner, up top of the stand. Ronnie would have been able to get on the ball and maybe play a pass, as Brady would have done. He just said Jack didn't trust him. He said Jack didn't trust Kevin Sheedy either. He wanted midfielders to run. He didn't want them to get on the ball. He wanted his full-backs to knock it long and midfielders to get up and support. And Townsend could do that very, very well. Andy had no beef with Andy Townsend, or Ronnie had no beef with Andy Townsend. But I do think the Irish thing ended very sourly, because then he came back towards the end of his career when Jack had lost his grip, if you like, on that Euro 96 campaign, and there was the Liechtenstein game. And Ronnie was screaming even on the pitch, "Give the ball to me and I'll get it out."
He was still the fulcrum. He was still the very centre.
And Jack was saying, "No, knock it long." And Ronnie was talking to Jack, "You got to get it through the middle. Let's draw them out. Let's get the Liechtensteiner guys up out of the penalty area, up towards the halfway line, and then we play a little ball in behind them." No, it was long route one stuff, and they were heading it away. And then there was the Oscar game a few days later, where the lads sort of, it was hidey down in Limerick for a week, and that was the end of it. And another man, Jack Charlton, another man who stayed too long. But to me, Ronnie, one of the great footballers, and a different type of player to maybe what the archetype of midfielder is now, or what Jack Charlton wanted. But a wonderful footballer, and his record, exceptional.
Yeah, really nice piece there in the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday. Well done, Phillip, on that one. From Big Jack to Big Tom, Tommy Conlon, and indeed Big Tom himself.
What a send off for Big Tom.
This is
Everybody said love him.
It's something from.
Did you ever go to this gig? Or did you ever?
I didn't, but I can understand where it comes from, because just from I'm from rural part of Donegal.
Urban Ireland doesn't get this.
No, it doesn't.
No, I don't get it.
I grew up and everything I'd go to in the local hotel, all the bands you see, there were country and Irish. It was Brian Cole and the Buckaroos and Sandy Kelly and others. I never saw Big Tom.
But Telephone Bill and the Smooth Operators.
Yeah.
Michael Carwood. Ronald Collins was in that group.
But
Ron Collins has been in every group.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand it, to be honest. It just, but you just see the hold it had in people, and I saw that when I lived in London as well. When you're around places like Kilburn and Cricklewood and stuff, people really feed into the nostalgia of the kind of Ireland they were presented with, people like Big Tom, and they were very important to them. They were like rock stars in Irish London, or so I think it was. I can't remember who. There was somebody, some American commentator was talking about when he would go to Boston or New York. It was a superstar, because it just presented this image of Ireland that people wanted to hang on to. And
Tommy kind of touches on this, and his role of that country and Irish link to the Gael, as he puts it, and to just Irish life in general. I mean, I grew up with country parents. My dad was from Meath. Mam was born in the west of Ireland, and they would have met at dance halls and all that kind of stuff, and I would have had Live at 3 on at home pretty much every day. So the likes of Big Tom and Sandy Kelly and Ray Lynham and all these names are kind of indelibly printed in my head.
I think Ray Lynham was a bit different, because he's more in the American tradition.
But in terms of the Irish country artists are linked there. But the link with GA is very much keenly held with Big Tom and Orem, in particularly in Monaghan. The club needed a parcel of land to develop a new football pitch, dressing rooms, a stand, and a community centre, says Tommy. It was the late 1970s, and funding, of course, would be an issue. They'd identified a suitable plot for the project and approached the owner to discuss a possible purchase. The owner was local farmer, king of country music, and former RMGA footballer Tom McBride. And we went to him, recalls RM PRO Tony Graham, and Tom said, "Take whatever you want, boys. We'll not worry about money." It's a lovely little anecdote.
But I like the connection he draws with the Saw Doctors, which is interesting, and the appeal of them. Because Leo Moore and I remember, I can't remember, they were all involved in various punk bands around Tuam back in the day, Leo Moore and Davy Carton.
The Docs is the one he cites here. Well, no, there's another name.
And Leo Moore mentions, there's a quote from an interview with him where he talks about the influence the Stranglers, Clash, Sex Pistols had on him. But part of their large appeal was nobody had ever mentioned the GA in songs, in Irish music before. And they've done so in a few songs. There's one about a song called Broke My Heart. Yeah. And that sounds like, on the surface, something Big Tom would sing. But it's about a corner forward standing on the edge of the square who doesn't get the pass when he's an upward goal. Which is fantastic.
The very question, will Galway bait Mayo, is a yearly one in Connacht, but it's one that's there and said a certain way because of the Saw Doctors. Yeah, like song and music has a brilliant role of crystallising, I suppose, these things. Billy Joe Padden is immortalised, I think, in the same song as well. They have the Green Red of Mayo, as Tommy mentions here, has gone on to be, their version of it has gone on to be a staple of the Mayo Heartland.
Yes, played like whenever Mayo won a game in Croke Park, they played over the PA now.
Exactly, and there are more, and they've ones about Maroon and White is another one, and they play that as well, live-wise, and they're huge moments, and you see them play them in Australia, you see them play them in America, and the Irish American community, the Irish Anglo community, it's just huge thing for them. They focus on the music, but also the GA is part of it as well, and it all feeds into this one massive sense of Irishness. One thing Tommy does get wrong in this one, though, I think, he says that there's a current generation, he says, that kind of views this whole thing as anathema and wants to move away from it as quickly as possible. There was a series on RTE in recent weeks that shows the proliferation of country and Irish in communities, rural communities especially around the country. It's still massive, and it's still massive around younger people as well. Like if I say the words "hit the diff" to people, it will go over their heads. Phil Quinn's looking at going, "What the hell does hit the diff mean?" The Marty Moan is a king in certain communities. You talk about him in Dublin, no one has a Danny Willie is.
But like I remember when Donegal won the All Ireland 2012, the song they would sing on the bus after games together or playing the over the bit sing along was Wagon Wheel, which is it Nathan Carter?
It's Nathan Carter's version.
I've just written down Nathan Carter because I was down in Killag in Wexford last year.
Isn't that his Dylan song?
Rock, Wagon Wheel.
No.
Sure.
No.
But
what's your mouth out?
I don't country western isn't my gig. But my wife will tell you. My wife will tell you that. But we were in Wexford last year. We go there every year for holidays, and the Killag Fair was on, and they have a country and western afternoon, and we paid our money. We went along. You couldn't get it. You couldn't get a space in the field.
There you go.
All the bales of hay were taken by the time we got there, and the burger vans and the ice cream vans were all doing it, and the big set open sort of set dancing square sort of place on the stage behind it. It was rocking. Rocking. I was there with my paper and my book, and I said to her, "How long have I got?" 3 hours. She says, "It's going to be a long afternoon," I said. And the girls were there as well, and they all enjoyed it. And it is big, and you're right, it's more of a rural than an urban thing.
The other thing is, Richie, people don't realise a lot of these guys lived like Led Zeppelin. Like they weren't like.
Really careful now.
Well, be careful. But I mean, like they lived the rock.
Zeppelin's probably the extreme example.
The rock and roll. Yeah, okay.
We're not going to mention the country and Irish singer Red Snapper.
Lifestyle. Like it wasn't like they were saying the rosary before going on stage every night. There was a bit of sex, drugs, and rock and roll to the whole thing.
Certainly was. How could you deny it?
Like even the other night, if you saw the Late Late, I saw little clips of it. Late Late did a kind of a tribute Big Tom special. But Philomena Begley is 75 now, and she was
still doing Blank on the Ground.
Yeah, I was sitting on Ryan Turbidy's lap and making a quite ribald comment to him. So it was good.
Right.
They're interesting people.
We'll have to
survivors.
We'll have to clunkily change gears as we finish up. But I just wanted to get to Eamon Sweeney's piece in the back page of the Sunday Independent, because I know he writes extensively about Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliott's
racing. The huge week in national hunter racing.
I don't think we're going to have time to get to it, unfortunately, Philip, today. But he mentioned possibly disbanding Ulster Rugby. Does Eamon on the back page of the Sunday Independent today? You mentioned outside as well, Kieran, if we were to do a documentary about Irish rugby this year, it would be the most remarkable thing in the world because of the extreme highs and extreme lows that we've seen, even over the course of the last 2-3 months alone. It's been
well, like it reminds me. I know they're very different incidents. Clearly, you have to make that clear. But if you look at the documentaries around '94 World Cup and tying in what was going on with O.J. Simpson thing, so you had this like a huge sporting event, and then this massive event involving a sports person, but that was just completely off the radar. And now you have this, like, you have an Irish team not only winning a Grand Slam, but cruising to a Grand Slam. You have a possible All-Ireland final in Bilbao, of all places, between Leinster and Munster. And in the backdrop, the rape trial that went on for ages, that consumed it so many people were obsessed with, and that has made a lot of people question a lot of aspects of rugby culture and even of male culture in Ireland. That, like, you would need to be a really good documentary maker or a good writer if you're writing a book about it to do justice to it.
Right,
but I actually hope somebody does, because it's an amazing story. Like it's been one of the most fascinating periods in Irish sport I can remember the last few months, because of all the questions that it's thrown up.
Possibly a little bit of distance would be required from it, I think, at this stage, to try and get, I suppose, everything in order to see where the two lads
and you
end
do
up
find as well
sense.
that with distance people will talk.
Yeah.
Like in a few years' time, Joe Schmidt might talk, or Rory Best, about what the last few months have been like for them. But they're not going to talk now. You know?
There's an interesting suggestion from Eamon. It's not something I would necessarily agree with. It says it's been suggested that the Belfast court case and the resultant absence of Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding are partly to blame for Ulster's continuing underwhelming form. Anyone making that argument should remember that last season Munster had to cope with the tragic death of their coach, yet still make it to the Champions Cup semi-final. They knuckled down, battled on, and didn't feel sorry for themselves. I'm not too sure the comparison sit well together. I think the air of uncertainty for Ulster has hung over them for possibly a year or more now regarding this situation, whereas unfortunately with death, what you're left with is an immediate sense of finality. And you have to, like, this is the situation and you have to get over it. And literally not knowing from 1 minute to the next who your head coach is going to be next year, who your director of rugby is going to be next year, whether or not you have your best out half and one of your best centres available to you over the course of a year. I mean, that can't be good for the morale of the team as a whole. And not that I have a great deal of sympathy for them, given the statement that came out this week, but at the same sense, from a playing point of view, they haven't known what fork in the road to take at all in the past year, and that's got to be a difficult thing to manage, and I'm not sure the comparison sits so easily together. I don't know your view on it, Kieran.
I don't think no, I would agree that it mightn't be the fairest comparison to make, but he's right to bring this up, because it's a very interesting thing. Where does Ulster go from here? And where does Ulster go within Irish rugby now? Because even the way the wagons were circled up there with a lot of supporters and with public letters and support to them, and Willie John McBride, that there's a division here. Whereas Tony Ward wrote a really strong column in the Indo during the week about how there's so many aspects of rugby culture, even though the laddish thing, even gone back in his day, that people think was great fun, and he says, I despise that. Like, we have to get rid of all this crap. So I think a lot of people have to face up. Like, there seems to be a fair amount of people in Ulster that just want to blame the media, or particularly blame social media for all this. And there's a lot more to play than that. Direction.
It's pointing the finger in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
At that stage. It's there, we'll leave it. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to Phillip and also to Kieran this afternoon as well for their input too. More to come. We have been here with Thanks to Air. Let's make possible, and we'll be back with more next week.